Our vision is the elimination of online child sexual abuse images, and we are the UK hotline for reporting three things: child sexual abuse images hosted anywhere in the world, non-photographic images of children sexually abused which are hosted in the UK, and extreme adult content hosted in the UK. And to give you a sense of the scale of our work, I would say about 99.999% of what we do is the child sexual abuse content. Whilst there is an awful lot of what we'd call the obscene adult content, excuse me, which would fail UK law, unfortunately most of it is hosted outside of the UK. So in fact we do very little in that area. So you'll still be able to find an awful lot of that stuff on the internet. Okay, we're also a member of InHope, which is the International Hotline Association, and very importantly, we're a third of the UK Safer Internet Centre, with my colleague down here, Will Gardner from ChildNet International and Southwest Grid for Learning, and Will will be talking a little bit about the UK Safer Internet Centre. We're a charity, we're an independent organisation. We were set up by the internet industry about 17 years ago. At that time, the government sort of looked to the internet industry and said to them, look, you know, the mere conduit defence is no longer acceptable. You are hosting this material, what are you doing about it? I mean, in fact, when we were set up, there was no Google, there was no Facebook, you know, and all these organisations have existed since we started. So we were very much set up by the fledgling internet industry. And as a result, we're a self-regulatory body. So we have no powers as such, but the internet industry chooses voluntarily to remove content and to work with us. And by doing so, frankly, in their own words, they avoid any form of prosecution and also, more importantly, do the right thing. Because I don't know a single company or organisation who wants to be associated with this type of material, and it's certainly their commitment to work with us to have it removed. We have an independent board, and we also are totally independent of government and of law enforcement, although we have agreements with law enforcement which enable us to operate. We're funded by the internet industry. About 80% of our money comes from them, and those will be all the big names that you've heard of, plus many small filtering companies, and it's about 110 companies fund us. And then we also receive 20% of our funding from the EU as part of the Safer Internet Centre. So I probably don't need to tell you that online child sexual abuse is a huge issue at the moment. One of the reasons I wasn't here this morning was I was doing an interview for the BBC about the cyber sex ring in the Philippines and the work that the police have done to crack that. Although we don't actually deal with that in terms of, we deal with the content and the police deal with going after the bad guys, the reality is that the situation that you probably read about in the press today and saw on TV about children being filmed live for sexual purposes by people in the UK and other parts of the Western world. What will happen with those live videos is that they will be videoed and filmed, and then they will come back again and again and again, as we'll see those images when people report them to us. I would say about 18 months ago probably now, the whole issue kicked off in a big way in the UK with the Jimmy Savile situation, and of course it's just continued on a day-to-day basis with one celebrity trial after another. But I think the turning point in the UK, everyone was obviously shocked and appalled about the Jimmy Savile trial and the revelations around Jimmy Savile, but what really made a difference in terms of the current level of activity was the two very, very tragic murders of Tia Sharp and April Jones. Because in both of those cases, the two men who committed those horrific crimes were found to have an awful lot of images on their computers, and there was a direct link made in court between them looking at images and going out and committing these horrific crimes. And as a result, the media and the government said, this is not acceptable, we need to do more about it. We were all brought in together, the internet industry, ourselves, police, all the partners, to look at ways in which we could step up and do more. Now that's really important, and everybody has done that, but it's important to remember that the UK was already the most effective country in the world in terms of working in partnership, and in fact the industry in the UK is phenomenally responsible compared to in many other parts of the world. So actually they were being held accountable for something which they have stepped up and taken responsibility for in a big way, but they also were already doing an awful lot of good work. So those were the big issues. In November, we all met with the Prime Minister and agreed a new package of work. And for us, that was really important because not only are we employing more analysts, but we're also going to be the first hotline in the world who will proactively seek content in future. So at the moment, we work from reports which are sent to us by the public. And from April, we will actually actively look at for this content. And that's been a really interesting situation about how you go out and actively seek and at the same time protect people's human rights. So what do we actually do? Well, you can report what you think might be illegal content to us. And if it's hosted in the UK, we will issue what's called a notice and takedown. So the fastest way to remove this terrible content is actually to remove it at source. And we will issue a notice and takedown to a UK company, and then they will remove it within an hour. If it's hosted outside of the UK, it's outside our jurisdiction, so we'll work with international law enforcement and the International Hotline Association to have that content removed. Typically, it takes about 10 days to have the content removed if it's outside of the UK. So to protect UK citizens, and in fact many other countries use our list as well, we have a blocking list which goes out every single day with all the URLs that we find which would fail UK law on child sexual abuse content, and that goes out across many parts of the world. We also have a keyword list of search terms that paedophiles use. And we also monitor old forms of technology because lots of paedophiles use very old technology, chat rooms, news groups, and actually that's the way in which they get together to share technology. Okay, and we also do a lot of research, and an example of some of the research we've done recently is we've been seeing an increased rise in the use of self-generated content. So this will be images that particularly teenagers, young people take of each other on their phones and then share. And to give you an example of what happens to it in relation to our work is that last year one of our analysts spent 40 hours, so 40 hours, when they were looking at their work, just monitoring and counting any image they came across which was a self-generated image which had been in effect uploaded and stolen and put on a paedophilic website, and in that time they encountered 12,500 images. So one of the things we would say to young people, and a message to get out in terms of understanding, there was a discussion this morning about, protecting your money and protecting all that side. Well, for those young people, once that image is out there, it's out there forever and we can't get it back. So it's really important that people understand the risks of their behaviour online. How big is the problem? The problem is absolutely huge. This morning when I was at a meeting yesterday with the police where they were talking about somewhere in the region of 360 million images being out there. Of course, nobody knows exactly and they change all the time, and an awful lot of them are duplicates. But in terms of what we did, last year in 2013, we took action. That means we actually took action and removed or put on our blocking list about 13,000 URLs. On each individual URL, you can have from 1 image to 1,000 images. 81% of those images were of children aged 10 and under. And about 4%, it varies between 4% and 8%, were children under the age of 2. And about 53% of those were of the worst kind of violence against children, so rape and sexual torture involving a child and an adult. So it's a really, really big issue. One of the good things is that we can do something about this, so we do encourage the British public to report to us, and they can report anonymously, and that's really important because we want to stop people going there in the first place. So we want to stop people's behaviour. The police have assessed that there are around, they were saying originally, last year they said about 60,000 people a year that they know of all the time being online, men looking at images, and they think it's probably somewhere between 48 and 60,000 people. So we need to stop people doing it in the first place and actually, stop going on this terrible journey. Over the past 17 years, we've assessed over 400,000 web pages and URLs, and we've removed over 100,000. One great thing about the UK is that less than 1% of this content is hosted in the UK. When we started, 18% of the content was. So the UK is phenomenally successful at removing this content. That's because we all work in partnership. But it means that the content moves somewhere else. So we all have to work together. It's a global issue. Massively important that we work on an international basis. As I said before, we can remove the content within 60 minutes in the UK. And we hope to do that with work very closely, particularly in the States where it takes up to 20 days to remove content. We really need to work very closely with our partners to try and bring this content down. We work very closely with the police, so if we see a new child, then we are able to tell the police immediately, work with them, and over the last 2 years we've helped and aided and assisted in the rescue of 12 children, which is fantastic news for our analysts, but it's actually a drop in the ocean in terms of the number of children who have been sexually abused. So what can you do about it? Well, you can get the message out about the IWF. We're a really important organisation, we're a tiny organisation, and we need all the support and help of British citizens, so you can get the word out that if people do stumble across child sexual abuse content, they should report it to us. They can do it without fear. We literally analyse the content. We pass the content on to the police, but we don't share any personal information with the police. And actually we can do something about that content, and also get the message out that it's not okay to look at this stuff. There is a child at the heart of every image, and there is a victim there, and it's not a victimless crime, and that people actually need to work together to say we're just not going to tolerate this, and it's not acceptable to go into this territory in the first place. Okay, so that's what we do. I would also say that the internet is a wonderful thing. One of the things I'm very privileged to do often is chair conferences on child internet safety. And I know that there's a big kind of move to say teenagers shouldn't be allowed to go on the computers, unsupervised children shouldn't be allowed to do that. People, we shouldn't be letting anybody online, and we should be really worrying about the sort of terrible side of it. And I always say, well, I see some of the worst side of the internet, and actually I still think the internet is the most fantastic, wonderful, incredible, enabling, empowering space. And the key is education. The key is actually people understanding the risks. Is that the same as safe sex or any of these other things? And it's our responsibility as adults to share that message and not to destroy what is a wonderful thing, the internet.